Now, Christianity has its 13th apostle, a faithful witness to the love, mercy, and truth of Jesus Christ. How about you? Will you be the 13th apostle?
I wonder how willing we would be to go to the beasts, to go to the lions, like our early Christian forebears were and did. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the 13th Apostle, where we explore the good, beautiful, and true of the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church and the amazing stories of that faith. This is Tom Caffrey with my co-host Dan Duddy. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Tom. You sound good. Better. Just accept my optimism, all right?
Yeah, well, optimism.
You sound
good. A combination of optimistic and realistic too. Yeah, well, so I got a ways to go. I don't even know where it's going.
Well, it's going up.
Seeing the doctors, so we'll see.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite saints. Is Perpetua. You know, we've heard her name countless times during Mass. And I guess a lot of the saints are, and I think particularly we're talking about female saints now, female martyrs, whose parents are alive, especially whose fathers are alive, have similar stories to tell. I know two of them, Perpetua and Barbara. Now, Barbara is fully recognized in the Eastern Orthodox Church. She's recognized as a saint, but has been removed from the canon by the Roman Church. In fact, I saw a movie on EWTN several years ago which made me weep about Barbara. It was an unbelievably beautiful presentation of the story. And if you haven't seen it, maybe you could go on to EWTN, and maybe in their archives they have that movie. In fact, I may watch it. I may look for it later. It was so good. And these stories are so powerful. They're almost hard to believe. The context, it's like, I always think of Christ's words to St. Thomas. You know, you believe because you've seen. Blessed are those who believe yet haven't seen. Probably because he knew it was going to be that much more challenging to be 2,000 years later as opposed to 200 or 300 years later like Barbara and Perpetua. And still, 200, 300 years, 2 or 3 centuries, that's still a long time. And to be willing to give up your life rather than renounce your faith is powerful. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we presented this to ourselves earlier in the week that we were going to talk about women martyrs, and I couldn't help but dig into the canon of the Mass because of the just the way those names are, they're rattled off to us every Sunday. But do we really dig in to the person of the names? And once we get to the female names, I confess I really dug in much more deeply going into tonight's episode, and I'm glad this was the theme that we took on, and yes, found that to be true as well, that Perpetua and Barbara had fathers who very much loved them, but they were pagans, right? I know that Perpetua's father was absolutely considered pagan, but that he went right in. I believe he went right into prison to try and protect her and call her out of it. And she said, "I grieved for my father, for he alone of all my kin would find no comfort in my suffering," and that she said that his suffering would be far more greater than hers as a martyr. But of course, she took her martyrdom as not as a suffering, but as an honor, for Christ himself. So, yeah, I mean, Perpetua and Felicity, I think in fact, I know in my readings, they both went in to their respective martyrdoms with, I believe, with 3 men, and, suffered as you said, at the hands of their procurators, or whatever the word is. You know the words better than I do. Among the beasts, and I know they're attacked by leopards and bulls or savage cows or something. And amazingly, the honor that the women here are showing us in coming to know them personally isn't really much different than the honor that we have for the strong women who, live around us, in the nature of who women are. And Perpetua and Felicity, I believe, were both with child. And right, Tom? Mm. I think Perpetua was able to keep her child in prison because the law was against taking the child, because Perpetua's child was still at the breast, was still nursing. And of course, there were no bottles then. And Felicity had her child before going in. So, and I think she had prayed for that to happen. I think 2 days before her sentencing, she had given birth. So, and with Perpetua having given birth in prison, no, I believe she gave birth in prison as well. Yeah, the guard said, "You feel that you suffered now, there'll be no suffering that you're about to face, in your persecution." And she said, I find no suffering in my persecution. So it's a beautiful story of mothers, the strength of women, and knowledge of the Mass to come more closely related to the names that are really put to us in Mass. And those, I believe we have 6 names that are put to us in Mass. We have Lucy, Agatha, Agnes, Cecilia, Perpetua, and Felicity. Yeah, I believe there's 42 names mentioned in the canon, and I believe seven women. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so common in our church, and we've talked about this, the things that are said, certainly in every Mass. And, we get so used to hearing them that they go in one ear, not the other. Because that's part of what we want to do, is we want to put the brakes on and say, let's stop at this name, or let's stop at this part of our faith, and let's examine it. Because maybe the audience isn't, either we or our audience has never examined it before. And when Perpetua made that comment about her father, well, she can only speak from the standpoint of a daughter. She can't speak from the standpoint of a father. What you and I would do, what lengths to which we would go to, in all likelihood, to stop our daughters from imminent, catastrophic suffering, almost indescribable suffering. So I, for Perpetua, for Barbara, for any of the fathers of the female martyrs, I totally understand what they were doing. It's an interesting debate. I've heard debates about this, read discussions about, does your death do more for the faith than your life? Mm-hmm. The priests, the missionaries, in that great book, that story was made into a movie, Silence. I know Liam Neeson was in the movie, and he obviously wouldn't be in the book. But I didn't read the book. I saw the movie, and I think it's, if you just stepped on that image of Christ, right, you'd be saved.
Right, I saw that movie.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, right, how do you show your love to Christ? Could your subsequent witness with your life of living the gospel, does that bring more souls to Christ?
Yeah, well, it's the way they lived their lives, which is what brought them to their martyrdom. So that's a story within itself, within each of those, beautiful creations, like you and I are. But what's really interesting too about Perpetua is that outside of Perpetua, most of these martyrs and the facts about them were really not necessarily facts, because their life stories had been handed down by word of mouth, generation to generation. There's been many generations passed on since their time. And by the time, the stories of these famous women were finally written down, it's considered that had become embellished. No one really knew for sure, but Perpetua wrote about hers, and it's plain to see, and it's very reasonable to accept the fact that what she wrote is pretty much exemplary of, what the others went through. It was a pretty simple lifetime, and the enemy was the enemy. So, and the kinds of persecutions and martyrdom that they suffered was somewhat across the board. It was pretty much the same. So that was quite a gift from Perpetua, that she did take the time to actually quote herself and talk about what the human pains and sufferings were as she faced her own martyrdom. And it was something that escalated from prison to a public trial, literally out in the public, eating her last meal in front of the public, and evangelizing into conversions to many people that would stand and witness her and Felicity and the three men that went down with her. And one of her quotes simply gets a little graphic. A few days later, we were lodged in prison, she says, and I was greatly frightened because I had never known such darkness. What a day of horror, terrible heat, owing to the crowds, rough treatment by the soldiers. To crown all, I was tormented with anxiety about my baby. And that's the mother. That's a beautiful woman going to face her death. I'm going to ask you a little personal question here, and our listeners too. We know that the fast ticket, the Amtrak nonstop train to heaven, is martyrdom. Tom, have you ever accepted martyrdom? Have you ever prayed? I have. Have you ever prayed though for the courage to have the faith of a martyr? Have you ever flat out prayed for martyrdom?
No. I have prayed frequently for the courage to be a faithful witness, come what may, in this culture. And could I martyr my profession? Would I be willing to sacrifice that? I don't have a pension. There's no financial security. So is it easier for someone to say yes when they've got some sort of a steady income, and if they lose their job, or they have their own business, but they lose important clients because of the stands they take?
True.
So that's because I don't really see myself as being in a situation in the United States of America of being an actual martyr from the standpoint of death. I do see it in the context that I just said.
Yeah, and I think that's referred to as white martyrdom. So I can see the potential for death in this culture, perhaps not in my years, but not shortly after my years. I mean, not long after my years. I believe shortly after my years, if things continue to go in the way that I believe that they're going. But definitely in the spirit of what you just said, as referred to white martyrdom, where you're persecuted in different ways, where you could be shunned culturally, especially politically, depending on who's running the country and what the beliefs are regarding faith. So I do believe we're in this position of such to at least have concern. Might be too strong of a word, but at least we're in a position where we can't help but envision such because it's happening. Hey, we have a friend, Mark Houck, who was by way of his faith was standing in front of a Planned Parenthood center for 23 years, and suddenly his family's attacked by the FBI at the front door. I mean, they came to the door and pointed guns. If Mark had answered that door abruptly and had the spatula in his hand that he was just had in his hand while he was flipping eggs for his family, he's not here right now. And he would have been shot for work at Planned Parenthood. So it's still under our nose, and we know that there's an older gentleman that was killed out in the Midwest, shot down at his front door. That's martyrdom, for the same thing, saving babies, Catholic man.
But then then we get to that question, though, which you and I have discussed.
What's that?
When we've talked about Dorothy Day, servant of God.
Go ahead.
Where her daughter, because of the misery she experienced, the devout faith of her mother, abandoned the faith and had 9 children. Maybe one has some semblance of the faith because of what I don't know if they described it this way, the poison of their mother. And how their mother, in their eyes, their mother's fanaticism and sacrificing them, not thinking that she was sacrificing them. I never saw anything, never read or heard anything that Dorothy thought, well, yeah, I may be sacrificing my daughter and all my grandchildren, but okay, well, it's worth it for me to do what I'm doing. And so that we're only going to get the answer. Maybe we won't, whatever. If we're going to get an answer, it'll be God giving us that answer as to whether that was the right thing to do. And if Mark goes to prison for 10 years or whatever, and his children go wayward like Dorothy Day's children and grandchildren, you say, okay, well, were they sacrifices? Were they Abraham's Isaac?
Well, you would have to hope and pray that the youngsters were educated in the virtues of what actually happened. I mean, in truth, Mark was protecting his young son, Mark, from physical threat from a guard, and it got flipped toward the FACE Act, FACE acronym for, essentially blocking the entrance of Planned Parenthood, which was absolutely false. But he was being a father on the streets of Philadelphia. It just so happened while he was doing Planned Parenthood work.
Yeah, the point is, though, when you get to I don't want to go too far down this road with Mark, but when you get to the point where you're saying, okay, well, here's your choice. Mm-hmm. Whatever was done, so now here's your choice. And whether it's Mark or Dorothy Day or Perpetua.
Or you or me, yeah.
But I mean, the ones where it happened. Mm-hmm. Perpetua, Felicity, mm-hmm. not being there for their children. Mm-hmm. That's... I heard a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to remember the name of the woman. I can't remember, but she was talking about it. She was, I just don't remember enough about her. I just remember one of the things she was talking about, and it was about martyrdom. And she was of the opposite opinion. She said, there's no way I'll martyr myself. There's just so much I've been blessed. I've enjoyed, all the good that she and others know that she has done in her life. And she wants to do so much more. And she was very frank about it. She was almost kind of a little humorous in a way. Just saying, I'm not going to do it. I don't think God's going to send me to hell because I decided against being a martyr in that violent way. But I'm going to go forward. I've committed myself to Christ. And I'm going to remain committed to Christ. But I'm not going to.
How will she show that commitment to Christ? How does she show that commitment to Christ?
By living the corporal works of mercy.
Okay. Going to Mass? attending the sacraments, right?
Corporal spiritual works of mercy, but definitely the corporal works of mercy. What are you doing? What are you doing for others? Saint Ignatius and his spiritual exercises, a commitment to know God better, to know Jesus better, to love Him more deeply, and to follow and serve Him more completely.
Yeah, well, in that way, I mean, she or anyone is not putting themselves outside of the realm into the physical battle, into the visibility, whereas where she would be persecuted. Underground churches are the reason why they go underground. So that's an exaggeration of the point. But if you're not out there visibly, standing on a soapbox, like James did when he went into Jerusalem, then you're not really facing martyrdom. So yeah, gotcha. It's interesting. Very well,
interesting. The Catholic faith is a both and faith. That's what it's so often referred to as, a both and, as opposed to an either or. Now, I don't know whether anybody's ever used that terminology in this context, where you can have perpetuas and you can have, whatever this woman, but, Mother Teresa took a lot of heat. And I don't know whether she at any time came upon a dilemma and where she chose to maybe give a little bit, so to speak, so she could get a roof for the place. Because then what would happen to, say, perpetuas?
Thousands of children would suffer, if so.
Yeah, I mean, if you had 1,000 perpetuas and they each had a child, you had 1,000 perpetuas children perhaps suffering. And Mother Teresa knew the suffering that all her people had. And so would she be thought less of?
Well, it doesn't mean, it's a great point. And it does not mean that she was a coward by any means, or she was without courage by doing so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe she would say, listen, I was afraid. And I didn't want to do that. That could be anybody.
But you know what afraid means. You know what courage means, right? So we don't have to say that. It's what happens in the presence of fear. So
right. So which choice? Is there only one choice in fear?
Exactly. Right.
Is there a choice? Okay, well, I don't want to do that. I'm going to sacrifice my morals.
Right. Yeah.
Right. For my own sake.
Yeah, it's a rational choice.
Maybe she sacrificed herself for her patients.
Yeah, I hear you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Good discussion.
All right, Danny, I'm going to pray that you're never martyred. And if you are, I'm going to want front seat tickets.
See, you can't have both.
And then I'm going to tell the story of you. I'm going to spread the word.
Not everything, though, okay?
And you're going to be in the canon.
Oh, and Danny, it's going to be... I want to be up there with the men, though, in the front. Stephen, Matthias, Barnabas, Ignatius, Danny.
Exactly.
Felicity, Perpetua, Tom, Agatha.
Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to tell your story, buddy.
All right, man. There's not much to say. The best part about my story is I'm Tom's friend.
Danny, that humility just never gets...
It's great to have you back, Tom.
It's good to be back. All right. So, I don't know. I'm sure somebody out there has been praying for me. And you know what? We all pray for each other, come what may. And so thank you for your prayers. And you're welcome for our prayers, because Danny and I pray for you guys. Okay, Danny.
Stay tuned, folks. I got you. Stay tuned for the Angelus and your prayer intentions with Peter and Jemmy.
WQPHradio.org. Tell a friend. Tell as many as you can. Share the good news of WQPH and of the gospel of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Thank you, St. Perpetua, St. Felicity, and all of the martyrs. God bless you, Danny.
God bless you, Tommy, and God bless you all.
You are listening to WQPH 89.3 FM Shirley, Fitchburg. And now a word from author Peter and Jemmy, who is the host of Your Prayer Intentions, taking place every Saturday at 12:30 p.m.
Whether you're donating money or giving us prayers, without you, we don't go on. And if you do want to help us go on, please consider going to WQPHradio.org. There's a donate button there. You can give once, you can give monthly, and it makes a difference. It keeps all of our shows, and we have a great lineup of shows, keeps us going. And whether you're a fan of Your Prayer Intentions, whether you like Steve's show, Benedict's Harris Sundays at midnight, whether you like Brother Matthew and Brother Anthony from the Housetops, which is on Sundays 10:30 a.m. and 4 p.m., whether you're a fan of the Children's Rosary, which we have every day at 5 p.m., 7 days a week, whether you like our Local Matters show, which is Saturday at 11, or Talk Catholic, which comes right after us at 12:30. Larry's Music Off, Sunday at 11 a.m. We have the Shepherd's Pie Saturdays at 1 p.m. Or Dan and Tom with the 13th Apostle, which comes just before us at 11:30. Any of those shows and all the stuff you donate, you help these things come out. But what's also at the WQPH website, in addition to podcasts of our shows, is the prayer wall.
Right on the prayer wall, support WQPH and get WQPH 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on WQPHradio.org.
Thank you for listening to the 13th Apostle with Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey. For more information on Dan, visit his website at www.danduddy.com or email dcduddy@gmail.com. Tom's website is faithpilgrims.com or email trcaffrey@faithpilgrims.com. How about you? Will you be the 13th Apostle?